In my experience growing up, I cannot tell you how many nights we spent as young Muslim teenage boys on the curb of the masjid outside. On the curb of the masjid outside. Why? And there was a gym, empty, brand new, waiting to be played in. Why could we not play in it? Simply because somebody just didn't want us to play in it. And down the street was a church that had open gym, regardless of religion, regardless of anything. Come in, sign a piece of paper. And do you know the piece of paper, you know what they made you sign? It actually said that I'm willing to talk about Jesus being my Lord and Savior if you want to play free basketball. SubhanAllah, how many people have turned away truth because of how it was treated with them? And how many people have accepted falsehood because of how it was presented to them, right? So the first thing that we have to understand when it comes to communication is we have to value each other's voice. Value one another's voice. Anyone here ever been in an argument before? Anyone? Come on, we're Muslim. Anyone here ever argued before? Right? There's literally passages in the Quran about argumentation that we have to listen to, okay? So you've been in an argument. What's the most frustrating thing in an argument? What is the most frustrating thing in an argument? It's when they win, right? No, I'm joking, right? What is it? Yes?
For me, it's the criticism when they criticize your idea.
Okay, it's when they criticize your idea. That's pretty frustrating, right? But you're still actually way ahead of most people. At least they're hearing your idea. What's even more frustrating than having somebody criticize your idea? They don't want you to talk. They're not even listening to you. You know when the Prophet ﷺ used to recite Quran, what did the Quraysh used to do sometimes? They used to plug their ears. The most frustrating thing in any conversation is when you feel like the people you're talking to are not what? You're not even listening to me. You don't even care about what I have to say. You're not even hearing my concerns. You know what's beautiful about the Quran, subhanAllah, is that it tells us stories, and in these stories there are so many lessons. There's a story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim, Abul Anbiya, the father of the prophets. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he had a son Ismail. And this son, this very dear son, he deeply, deeply wanted a child, wanted a son. Allah Ta'ala granted him and his wife Hajar alayhi salam, He granted them a son. And he had to spend a long time away from them. He dropped them off in the valley of Mecca, right, where there was no water, no vegetation. He left them there. Then he came back. Then they did things together, like father-son activities, like spent time together. They built the Kaaba together. Could you imagine that kind of Saturday? You wake up, you're like, hey, Dad, what are we going to do? He's like, we're building the Kaaba today, right? Imagine like that kind of father-son bonding, right? Like I remember the bonding of playing sports with my dad growing up. Could you imagine? And my bond with my dad is very close because of those memories we have together. Could you imagine the bond of you and your dad building the Kaaba together or building a masjid together? How beautiful that bond would be. So the Prophet Ibrahim loved his son Ismail very much. Very much. And Allah even described Ismail as a beautiful son, like a good kid, right? The kind of son that every dad wants to have. And then Ibrahim one night has a dream. And we know that the dreams of prophets are wahi, the revelation from Allah. It's one of the ways in which Allah communicates with prophets. Sometimes He sends angels, sometimes He communicates with them through their dreams. And He says, Inni ara fil manami anni adhbahuka. He says, oh my son, I saw in my dream that I have to slaughter you. I want you to understand the difficulty of him saying that statement. Why? There's a couple reasons. Number one, he loves his son. There's no parent ever wants to ever do any harm to their children. I know that a lot of children here are like, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure, right? No parent has ever wanted to do a single ounce of harm to their children, ever, ever. But Ibrahim is being commanded by Allah. The second thing is that wahi is non-negotiable. Meaning, this isn't a matter in which Ibrahim can negotiate with Allah. Oh Allah, I know you want me to slaughter him, but can I just slaughter this sheep instead? Can I just slaughter this animal instead? Can I just substitute I love my son. Can I substitute him with somebody else? This is wahi from Allah. It's revelation from Allah. And he's a prophet. He's been given this mission, this job to obey the revelation from Allah and to teach people this message from Allah. So he goes to his son and he says to his son, Inni ara fil manami anni adbahuka. I see that in my dream I have to slaughter you. And then he says something profound, and this is the first lesson. Everyone ready for the first lesson? How to build conviction, how to build community conviction, family conviction, how to build communication. You have to value the voice of the person you're talking to. You have to shut your mouth sometimes and open your ears. And you have to listen and actually care about what they're saying. He says, فَانظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى. In a situation where it is irrelevant what Ismail's opinion is, Allah has given a command, the command must be followed. That is the truth. That is the haqq. He is a prophet who has been given a command. There is no discussion. Okay? In that moment, Ibrahim asks his son, فَانظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى. Tell me how you feel. Tell me how you feel. I want to know how you feel. He says to his son in a moment where how his son feels is not going to change a single thing. Tell me how you feel. Fathers, mothers, this is a big lesson. A lot of us, we walk around and say that we're doing things for our kids because we have to. But we don't do the second thing, which is listening to our kids because we should. And it doesn't matter if how our kids feel or the opinion they have about what's going on is going to impact the trajectory of our decision. It doesn't matter. What matters is that our kids know that when they talk, their voices are heard. What matters is when people communicate, they feel like we listen to them. This is a prophetic trait. It's a prophetic characteristic. The Prophet ﷺ was one of the best listeners. That when people would come to him and talk, he would not shut them down. He would not interrupt them. Okay? He would listen to what they were saying and let them know that your voice is important. Your opinion, even if it's not completely accurate, I value the fact that you feel a certain way. And what does Ismail do? Ismail says, Ya abati if'al ma tu'mar. Oh my father, do what you've been commanded. Satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. You will find me, God willing, from amongst those who have patience. If you value the voice of your children or your family or your spouse, you will find that when you value their voice will impress you. It will surprise you. It will give you that tranquility. Ismail doesn't say, oh my dad, this is crazy, I have to leave. Oh dad, this is what, I knew that something was wrong. He said, Dad, do what you've been commanded. He trusted his son and his son delivered on his trust. This is a very important lesson in communication. And by the way, I myself am a father. My wife and I have a son named Musa. He's 20 months old, right? He's 1.5 years old. He's already a teenager. He talks back. You know, we'll put on Baby Shark on TV. And he goes, not this, right? And I kid you not, especially for people who are in the audience who are like 16 to 30, or maybe you don't have kids, I want you to understand something, that this fear of raising children and having them love Allah and His Messenger is a very legitimate fear. That sometimes we think that our parents are being a little bit dramatic. Why are you so worried about me praying? Why are you so worried about this? Why are you so worried? Don't worry, I'm Muslim. But whenever your kids are like as old as Musa, you start to have these really serious thoughts about what if my son, who I've named after a prophet of Allah, the most mentioned prophet in the Quran, what if he grows up not loving Allah? Who's responsible for that? And I have sleepless nights where I toss and turn. My wife and I have entire conversations where we just ask Allah to protect him. And we ask Allah to make us good parents so that he grows up loving Allah. It's a big concern that parents have. So there are 3 things that Shaykh and I have talked about over the course of weeks and months of having these discussions. What can we do as communities, as families, to nurture this appreciation. Because what is conviction? Conviction is a fancy word for a person having certainty in something. And when does a person have certainty in something? When they know that they need it. So what can we do as communities to instill this absolute and deep appreciation of Allah and His Messenger within ourselves and within our families? The first thing is actually very beautiful, and that is that we have to work on our communication. We absolutely have to work on the skill. It's not a given. It's not a right. It is a skill that must be developed. You know, how many of us, raise your hand, if someone ever tried to explain something to you and you asked them why, and they said, just because I said so. Anybody? Okay, you teenagers are not being honest. I know your parents have said this to you, right? Okay, number one, they said just because. Raise your hand if someone has ever tried to explain something to you and you understood what they were saying and you actually thought they were right, but the way they were doing it, you could not accept it. Anybody? This happens in arguments all the time. I'll be arguing with somebody, right? And what they're saying, I get it. The point they're trying to make, I understand it. But the way they're saying it is so bad, is so hurtful, is so destructive, that the way they're saying it makes me never want to agree with them. That is called communication. Communication is not about the point that you're making, but it's about how you're making that point. So, for example, is it really that crazy to believe that there is one God? No, absolutely not. Is it really that far-fetched and outlandish to believe that there's one God? No. But the problem when we talk about nurturing conviction within ourselves and families is not the content, it's not the substance of the message, but it's how we deliver it.